The same applies for graduation rates, and retention. Now you're going to say, and that I think is what, about 25% of the rankings. People will say, gee, how can you be against measuring graduation rate? I mean, after all of the calls in Washington and elsewhere are for increased accountability. We have to be able to measure how well you're doing things. And after all, isn't graduation one of the goals of college? Well, certainly it's one of the goals. Actually, growing in college is another goal. But when you look at the number in terms of graduation rate or retention for college overall, again, it's not really telling you much about the value added of that college while the student was there. We all know that there are a whole series of indicators coming in of who are going to be the students who have difficulty graduating going out. And we know that some of that gets reflected in terms of test scores coming in, that some of that reflects certain cultural realities or biases as you wish, that some of that reflects lack of privilege or lack of privilege, that some of that reflects the fact that somebody is first generation in his or her family to go to college. And so if we just look at graduation rate, essentially, there again, what we're doing is saying, admit the people who are going to be successful anyway. And frankly, then from a college president's perspective, those people, I might add, don't need the same kinds of resources and services applied to them. So it just increases the pressure to admit those people. Graduation rate numbers can also really play games with you. I mean, let's say you imagine two colleges. I'll name them College A and College B to show how creative I am. And let's say you had two groups of incoming students, the more privileged and the less privileged. Now imagine that the more privileged, no matter where they go to college, graduate at a much higher rate than the less privileged, which is a pretty accurate statement overall. College A could do better in terms of the graduation rate for the more privileged than College B. And College A could do better in terms of the graduation rate for the less privileged than College B, right? So here, College A does better in terms of graduation rate, regardless of whether the student is privileged or less privileged. And yet, College B could still have a higher graduation rate. Everybody see that? How can that happen? Because if College B, if the percentage of students at College B are predominantly more privileged rather than less privileged, even though College A is doing better in each category, the overall higher rate among the more privileged will actually give College B a greater graduation rate than College A, even though College A does better among both. Everybody see that? It's actually fun to play with the numbers as I have to see what the differences need to be. But anything that you can play those kinds of games with really does raise a question in terms of its value, in terms of measuring colleges. So you take a step back and you say, we have this system in which people look at rankings, in which these rankings, based on how we react to them, put a lot of pressure on colleges to admit those students, frankly, who are going to do well anyway. There are a whole group of students, you know who they are in your high schools, who no matter where they go to college, they are going to be successful. And I always think that one of the great scams that higher education has been able to get away with, and parents let us do it, they have these kids for 18 years and they shape them and they mold them, et cetera, and then we have them at college for 4 years, and then we spend the rest of their lives claiming credit for everything that they do. And the pressure then is really on us to admit those students who do well anyway. The rankings also, though, assume that quality is something that can be quantified. They basically have as an underlying presumption that if you can't measure it, it really must not matter. And I think, and I hope that you will agree that that is a pretty dangerous presumption to have, especially given the kinds of experiences that we want students to have at college. They also lead to an assumption that one size fits all, that this is a top 10 college, this is a top 25 college, this is a top 50 college, regardless of what kind of student you are. And I will be the first to admit, as president of Defiance College, I of course think we are a wonderful college, but we're not the perfect college for every student. There are some prospective students whom I meet who I say, gee, I can tell we're just a great college for that student. But there are others for whom, frankly, we're not the right college. And that does not get reflected at all in terms of rankings. There is, though, something even more pernicious, I think, about what is happening here. And I think that it is really a broader cultural issue. We have really, as a culture, started to confuse excellence with exclusivity. We have started to say if something is elite, that means that it must be excellent, that it must be good. If something is exclusive, which you can show by how many people you keep out, that means it must be of high quality. And when you think about it, how strange is that, especially when we're talking about education? The whole notion of education is that it is supposed to be the great leveler, that education is supposed to be the thing that gives opportunity to students, that enables actually a democracy to flourish by enabling students from all different backgrounds, all different levels of privilege to be able to climb the ladder of opportunity. And here we have kind of at its core a notion which is actually directly contrary to that. Now, the truth is, it is not U.S. News that has brought this on us. I think, what's that scene in which, who's the enemy and we discover the enemy is us? I can't tell you how many meetings I went to as dean of the law school where all of the deans would be together and everybody would be decrying how horrible the rankings were. And then everybody would leave and do things that actually were because of the rankings. Right? I actually had a librarian at a law school, I won't tell you which, it's in the southwest of the country, actually came to me and said, I want to get rid of some books in the library, but because U.S. News still measures the number of books in your library as one of the measures, which of course think how crazy that is, especially in today's world. He said, I went to my dean and the dean said, will this be reflected in U.S. News? And I honestly said, yes. And the dean said, well, then you can't get rid of them. He said, so I went back to the dean. I said, do you mind if I use them as insulation? Yeah. Then we'll have them. They might even decrease utility costs. And we'll still have the books.